wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the maintenance tunnel beneath the massive alien research facility on 442B. The air recycling system had been acting up for 3 days straight, and the scientists who ran this place were getting increasingly frustrated with the primitive human technology they'd been forced to accept as part of the Galactic Trade Agreement. The irony wasn't lost on. Here he was, fixing equipment that was supposedly beneath the standards of these advanced aliens, yet none of them could figure out why their precious atmospheric processors kept failing. They needed human ingenuity, even if they'd never admit it. The tunnel opened into a vast sub-basement that had never seen before. His cut through the darkness, revealing rows of massive containment pods stretching into the shadows. Each pod hummed with energy, and strange symbols glowed along their surfaces. This definitely wasn't on any of the facility schematics he'd been given. As he moved deeper into the chamber, searching for the faulty air intake valve, a sound stopped him cold. It was quiet, almost inaudible over the mechanical hum, but unmistakably organic. Someone was crying. Followed the sound until his light fell on a pod that was different from the others. Instead of the opaque metal shells, this one had a transparent front panel. Inside, curled up in a fetal position, was the most extraordinary being he'd ever seen. She appeared humanoid, but was clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle scaled pattern that caught the light like polished emeralds. 2 small horns protruded from her forehead, and her hair was a cascade of silver that seemed to move on its own. Most striking were the delicate wings folded against her back, translucent membranes stretched between elegant bone structures. But what broke his heart was the absolute terror in her large, violet eyes. She was awake, fully conscious, and paralyzed with fear. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at nothing, her body trembling uncontrollably. Pressed his hand against the pod's surface. The moment his palm touched the transparent barrier, the girl's eyes snapped to his. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other across the divide of species and technology. Then her expression changed from vacant terror to desperate hope. "Hey there," whispered, knowing she probably couldn't hear him through the pod. "I'm going to get you out of here." The pod's control panel was covered in script, but had picked up enough of their language during his 2 years on this rock to understand the basics. What he read made his blood boil. The display showed vital signs, stress levels, and something labeled as fear response amplification protocols. They were torturing her, deliberately. His hands flew over his tablet, pulling up the facility's network. He'd learned long ago that being underestimated as a simple technician gave him access to places and systems that others ignored. Within minutes, he'd hacked into the research database and found her file. Her name was, and according to the records, she was the last surviving member of the species from the Veil Nebula. They had found her during an archaeological expedition 3 years ago and brought her here for study. The truth was far worse. They had been powerful once, capable of faster-than-light travel without ships, communication across vast distances, and manipulation of energy in ways that the galactic community didn't understand. But there had been destroyed in a stellar collapse, leaving only scattered refugees across the galaxy. The research notes revealed that the believed fear was the key to unlocking abilities. They'd been subjecting to increasingly traumatic experiences, monitoring her biometric responses, and trying to force her to manifest her species' legendary powers. So far, she'd shown no signs of the abilities they sought. The notes suggested this was because the fear had become so overwhelming that it had created a psychological block. Rather than reducing their torment, they decided to increase it. Felt sick, he'd always known the look down on other species, but this was beyond cruel. It was evil. He looked back at who was still watching him with those haunting violet eyes. She seemed to sense his emotions through the barrier, and somehow, impossibly, he felt a whisper of thought that wasn't his own. "Please help me." The mental voice was so faint he almost dismissed it as imagination. But the way her eyes widened told him it had been real. Despite everything they'd done to her, despite the paralyzing fear, she was still trying to reach out. Made his decision. The air recycling system could wait. He had something more important to fix. The pod's locking mechanism was biometric, keyed to physiology, but had learned a thing or two about alien security systems. He pulled out his multi-tool and began carefully dismantling the scanner housing. Inside, he found the optical sensor array and began rewiring it with spare components from his toolkit. It took him 40 minutes to jury-rig a bypass, during which time watched his every move with growing hope. When the lock finally disengaged with a soft hiss, her eyes filled with tears of relief. The pod opened like a flower and was hit by the smell of antiseptic and fierce sweat. Tried to move but collapsed immediately, her legs unable to support her after what must have been months of confinement. Caught her before she hit the floor, and the moment their skin touched, the world exploded with sensation. Images flashed through his mind, a beautiful world of floating cities and crystal spires, the terror of watching it burn as a star went supernova, the grief of being the only survivor, years of running and hiding before being captured. But underneath the pain, he felt something else: warmth, gratitude, and a strength that had been buried but not destroyed. "It's okay," he whispered, holding her trembling form. "You're safe now. I'm going to get you out of here." Looked up at him, and when she spoke, her voice was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You are not like them." "No, I'm human. We're different," helped her to sit up slowly. "Can you walk?" She shook her head. "I have not. It has been long time since." "How long have you been in there?" "Seasons, many seasons." Her English was broken but understandable. "They take me out sometimes, but only to—" She shuddered, unable to finish the sentence. Felt anger burning in his chest. "Well, that's over now, but we need to move fast. They'll notice you're missing soon." He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. Her legs shook like a newborn fawn's, but she was determined to try. As they made their way toward the tunnel entrance, his mind raced through possible escape routes. The facility was on high alert status. He couldn't just walk out with an escaped alien test subject. But there were maintenance shafts that led to the cargo bay, and he knew the security schedules better than anyone. If they could reach his workshop, he might be able to hide her long enough to figure out a long-term plan. "Why do you help me?" asked as they paused at the tunnel entrance. "Your species has agreement with the— Yes, this could bring you trouble." Looked at her, seeing the way she tried to hide her hope behind a mask of resignation. She'd been betrayed and hurt so many times that she couldn't quite believe someone would help her without wanting something in return. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Where I come from, we have a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. They have power over you, but they're using it to cause harm. I might not have as much power as them, but I have enough to help one person. That makes it my responsibility to do so." Something shifted in his expression. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something hadn't seen before: curiosity about this strange human who spoke of responsibility and helping strangers. The journey through the maintenance tunnels took nearly an hour. Strength improved gradually as they walked, though she still needed to lean on for support. He could feel her growing more alert, more present, as if being out of that horrible pod was slowly bringing her back to life. They had to hide twice when guards passed nearby, pressing themselves into shadowy alcoves while alien voices discussed routine patrols. Each time felt tense beside him, her fear spiking. But she didn't freeze up completely like she had in the pod. Having someone she trusted beside her seemed to anchor her to the present. His workshop was tucked away in the lower levels of the facility, officially designated as Human Maintenance Operations, but largely ignored by the alien staff. He'd made it comfortable over the years. With human-style furniture he'd built himself and a small kitchenette where he could prepare Earth food. When they finally reached the workshop, his legs gave out completely. Caught her and helped her to the small couch he'd cobbled together from cargo padding and salvaged fabric. "Rest here," he said, pulling a blanket over her. "I need to check the security feeds and see if they've noticed you're missing yet." Caught his hand as he started to turn away. "You will not leave me." The vulnerability in her voice nearly broke his heart. "I'm not going anywhere. I just need to use my computer over there." He pointed to his workstation across the small room. "I'll be right here the whole time." She nodded and reluctantly let go of his hand. Booted up his system and hacked into the facility's security network, something he'd done countless times to check work schedules and avoid annoying supervisors. The containment level was still quiet. The night shift guards were doing their rounds, but none had ventured into the sub-basement where he'd found. Her pod was in a section that was only checked during the day shift change, which meant they had maybe 6 hours before her absence was discovered. "We have until morning," he told her. Then all hell is going to break loose. Had been staring at his workshop with wonder, taking in the human touches he'd added to the sterile alien environment. This is your home. My home away from home. Earth is about 40 light years from here, so I don't get to visit very often. He sat down on the edge of the couch. Tell me about your home before what happened. Her eyes grew distant, but not with fear this time. Was beautiful, cities that floated among the clouds, connected by bridges of crystal and light. We could fly between them, feeling the wind beneath our wings. She touched her own wings unconsciously. The star songs were so clear there, we could hear the music of the cosmos. Star songs. The way energy moves through space. Every star, every planet, every living thing makes its own music. Most species cannot hear it, but for it was like you're breathing. Always there, always part of us. Her expression grew sad. I have not heard them clearly since the evacuation. The fear, it blocks everything. Felt a chill of understanding. That's why they're torturing you. They think the fear will unlock your abilities. Yes, they do not understand that fear is what locks them away. She looked at him with those incredible violet eyes. But when you touched me, when you helped me, for a moment, I could hear whisper of star song again. The implications of that statement hit like a freight train. If abilities were tied to emotional state rather than fear response, then everything they were doing was not just cruel but counterproductive. They were preventing the very thing they were trying to achieve. What do you need to hear them clearly again? He asked. Safety, trust, peace. She said the words like they were foreign concepts. Things I thought were lost forever. They're not lost, they're just buried under what's been done to you. Reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't, he gently took her hand. We're going to help you find them again. The moment their hands connected, felt that whisper of otherworldly sensation again. This time, instead of the chaotic flood of traumatic memories, he sensed something else. It was like hearing a beautiful piece of music played through static, distorted and faint, but undeniably there. Gasped, her eyes widening. You can help amplify it. Your mind, it is like a stabilizing frequency. I don't understand. Humans, you do not hear star songs naturally, but your minds work in harmony with them anyway. You are, she searched for words, like antenna that helps signal become clear. Thought about all the stories he'd heard growing up, tales of humans who seemed to bring out the best in alien species they encountered. He'd always assumed they were just feel-good propaganda, but maybe there was something to them after all. A soft alarm chimed from his workstation. Reluctantly let go of his hand and went to check the system. His heart sank when he saw the message waiting for him. What is wrong? Asked, sensing his change in mood. They've moved up the morning inspection. We've got maybe 2 hours instead of 6. Ran his hands through his hair, thinking frantically. I need to get you off this station, but I can't do it alone. I'm going to have to call in some favors. He opened a secure communication channel and sent out a coded message to someone on Earth. The response came back within minutes. Help is on the way. Keep her safe. Sarah. Who is Sarah? Asked. She'd moved to stand beside him, still unsteady but determined not to be left out of decisions about her own fate. My sister, she works for, let's call them the good guys back on Earth. There are humans who make sure that galactic treaties are actually being followed, not just on paper but in spirit. Turned to face her. But they can't get here for at least 12 hours. We need to hide you until then. Nodded, but could see the fear creeping back into her expression. The thought of being trapped and hunted again was triggering her old trauma responses. Hey, he said softly, reaching out to touch her face. Look at me, you're not alone this time. I'm not going to let them take you back to that place. The simple human gesture seemed to anchor her again. I trust you, she whispered. I do not know why, but I trust you. Because trust is a choice, not a feeling. You're choosing to believe that not everyone in this galaxy is like and you're right. Spent the next hour preparing. He gathered supplies, created false maintenance orders that would give him legitimate reasons to be in various parts of the station, and programmed several decoy signals into the computer network to confuse any search efforts. But the most important thing he did was simply stay close to. Every time her anxiety started to spike, every time the old fears threatened to overwhelm her, his presence seemed to calm her down. And each time she relaxed, caught glimpses of something extraordinary. When she was calm, the air around seemed to shimmer slightly. Electronics worked more smoothly near her, and could swear he felt a low harmonic vibration that seemed to resonate with everything around them. Her abilities were still there, just buried under layers of trauma and terror. "The star songs are getting stronger," she told him as they prepared to move to a new hiding spot. "With you here, I can almost remember what it felt like to fly between worlds." "Tell me about that," said as they made their way through another maintenance corridor. "What was it like?" "Imagine swimming through space itself, feeling the currents of gravity and solar wind like water against your skin. We could ride the electromagnetic fields between planets, surf the bow shocks of solar storms." Her eyes lit up with the memory. "The first time I flew from to its moon, I was only a child. My mother held my hand and taught me to feel the planet's magnetic field pulling us forward. It was like dancing with the cosmos itself." Listened, fascinated despite their dangerous situation. As talked about her past, about the wonders of her lost civilization, he could see her becoming more herself. The terrified, broken creature from the pod was still there, but she was sharing space with someone else. The person had been before her world ended. They reached their destination, an unused storage bay in the facility's oldest section. Had discovered it months ago during a routine inspection and had been using it as a backup workshop ever since. It was off the main sensor grid and only accessible through a maintenance hatch that most of the station's inhabitants didn't know existed. "We should be safe here for a few hours," said, sealing the hatch behind them. He'd stocked the room with emergency supplies over the months, including some basic food and water. Explored the small space, running her fingers over the human equipment had stored there. "You prepare for many situations," she observed. "My grandfather used to say, 'Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.' It seemed like good advice for working on an alien space station." "Your family, they taught you to help others." Thought about his grandfather, who'd been a volunteer firefighter in addition to his day job. His father, who'd spent weekends building houses for families who'd lost their homes to natural disasters. His sister Sarah, who joined the Galactic Ethics Monitoring Division to ensure that humanity's expansion into space didn't come at the cost of their moral principles. "Yeah, I guess they did. We have this idea on Earth that being human means looking out for each other. All of us, not just the people who look like us or come from the same place." He sat down across from in the cramped space. "What about your family? What were they like?" His expression grew wistful. "My parents were star singers. They helped guide ships through the dangerous passages near our system. When the evacuation began, they stayed behind to help others escape." She was quiet for a long moment. "I was supposed to stay too, but they forced me onto the last transport ship. They said someone had to survive to remember." "And you have. You've kept their memory alive." "But I have failed to keep myself alive, not truly alive. These past years I have been, how do you say, existing, surviving, but not living." She looked at him with those remarkable eyes. "Tonight is the first time since the evacuation that I have felt like myself again." Felt something shift between them, an understanding that went beyond words. They were both far from home, both trying to do the right thing in a galaxy that often seemed hostile to such concepts. But together, they'd found something that had been missing for both of them. A connection, a purpose, a reason to hope. The alarm on his portable scanner chimed softly. They'd found the empty pod. "They know you're gone," said, checking the security feed on his tablet. "Search teams are forming up. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they start doing a systematic sweep." Closed her eyes and could see her struggling against the rising tide of panic. But this time, instead of being overwhelmed, she reached out and took his hand. "Help me remember how to listen," she whispered. Didn't fully understand what she meant, but he squeezed her hand and tried to project every feeling of safety and trust and determination that he could manage. To his amazement, he felt her mind touching his again, but gently this time, like a whispered conversation rather than a flood of traumatic memory. And underneath it all, he heard it, faint but unmistakable, a complex harmony that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The star song that had spoken of, the music of the cosmos itself. For just a moment, understood what it might feel like to fly between worlds, to dance with the gravitational currents of space, to be part of something vast and beautiful and eternal. Then the moment passed, but its echo remained, and when opened her eyes, they were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with power. "I can hear them," she whispered, wonder replacing terror in her voice. The star songs, they're still there. They've been there all along, waiting for me to remember how to listen. Around them, the lights in the storage bay began to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. The electronic equipment hummed with new harmonies, and somewhere in the distance could hear the confused voices of guards as their sensors began picking up readings they couldn't explain. Was coming back to life, and was beginning to realize that helping her escape was going to be just the beginning of their adventure together. The station-wide alert klaxon began wailing just as eyes blazed with renewed power. Felt the change in her immediately, where moments before she'd been fragile and broken, now she radiated an energy that made the very air around them shimmer. "They're coming," said, watching the security feeds as armed guards spread out through the facility's corridors. "Multiple teams, full tactical gear. They're not planning to take you alive." Stood slowly, her movements now graceful and controlled. The terrified creature from the pod was gone, replaced by something magnificent and dangerous. "Then we do not hide anymore." "Whoa, wait," grabbed her arm gently. "I know you're feeling stronger, but there are dozens of them and they have heavy weapons. We need to be smart about this." She looked at him with those violet eyes, and he saw something in them that made his breath catch. It wasn't just power, it was purpose. "You do not understand. They did not just imprison me. They stole 3 years of my life, tortured me, broke my mind and spirit, and they did it to learn my abilities so they could use them for war." The air around her began to crackle with visible energy. "I will not run from them anymore." Felt a chill of fear, but not for himself. If you lose control, if you hurt them, you become what they said you were, a dangerous alien who can't be trusted. That stopped her cold. The energy field flickered and dimmed as she considered his words. "You think I am becoming monster?" "No, I think you're angry and you have every right to be, but the best revenge isn't destroying them, it's proving them wrong about everything." Moved to stand in front of her. "You're not a weapon, you're a person. A person who's been through hell and came out the other side stronger. Show them what that really means." Stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. The crackling energy around her shifted, becoming less chaotic and more controlled. "What do you suggest?" "We get you off this station alive and free. We document what they did to you. We make sure the galaxy knows the truth about the research program." Pulled up the facility schematics on his tablet. "My sister's people can help with that, but first we need to survive the next few hours." The sound of footsteps in the maintenance corridor outside made them both freeze. Quickly shut down his tablet and motioned for silence. Through the thin walls, they could hear voices speaking in clipped military tones. "Sector 7 clear, moving to Sector 8. No trace of the subject in the lower engineering levels. Command wants her found within the hour. Use lethal force if necessary." Felt tense beside him, but this time it wasn't with fear. It was with barely contained fury. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently to remind her of their plan. They waited until the footsteps faded before moving. Led the way through a series of maintenance tunnels he'd mapped out over his months on the station. His goal was the cargo bay, where incoming supply ships docked. If Sarah's people were sending help, that's where it would arrive. But as they moved through the cramped passages, began to notice something strange happening to the station around them. Lights flickered in patterns that followed breathing. Electronic systems hummed with harmonies that hadn't been there before. Even the air recycling system, which had been malfunctioning for days, suddenly began running smoothly. "You're doing that, aren't you?" he whispered during a pause in their journey. Looked confused. "Doing what?" "The electronics. They're responding to you somehow." She listened for a moment, tilting her head like she was hearing something he couldn't. "The star songs are stronger here than they have been in years. This station sits at intersection of several gravitational fields. It is like," she searched for the right words, "like being at the center of a vast musical instrument." Felt a chill of understanding. They chose this location for their research facility because of the gravitational anomalies. They thought it would help them study your abilities. Yes, but they did not understand what they were creating. They built their station in a place where the cosmic harmonies converge. With my abilities returning, I can hear all of it. Every electrical current, every data stream, every communication signal. Her eyes widened as the full implication hit her. "I can hear everything that happens on this station." Before he could ask what she meant, his expression changed to one of urgent alarm. "There are more ships coming. Not your sister's people, these are military vessels, and they are carrying weapons designed specifically for fighting. His blood turned to ice. How do you know that? I can hear their communication signals. They have been preparing for the possibility that I might escape and regain my abilities. They have weapons that disrupt the star songs, that can cut me off from the cosmic harmonies completely. How long do we have? 20 minutes, perhaps less. His mind raced. 20 minutes to get off a heavily guarded space station while avoiding both the internal security forces and incoming military ships equipped with anti-weapons. It should have been impossible. But then he remembered something his grandfather used to say. When the situation is impossible, change the situation. How much control do you have over the station systems right now? She closed her eyes and seemed to listen to something only she could hear. More than I should. The convergence of gravitational fields makes everything connected. Power grid, life support, communications, even the docking bay controls. Can you control them without the knowing it's you? A slow smile spread across her face, and for the first time since he'd found her, saw a hint of the mischievous person she might have been before her world ended. You want me to cause trouble. I want you to cause chaos. Can you make it look like the station is having system failures, random malfunctions that just happen to help us get to the cargo bay? Better than that. His eyes began to glow softly as she reached out with her abilities. I can make them think their own security protocols are malfunctioning. Doors that open when they should stay locked, elevators that go to wrong floors, communication channels that carry false information. Felt the plan taking shape in his mind. How about sensors that show us in places we're not? Easy. And the incoming military ships. His expression turned serious. Those will be harder. Once they arrive, they will have equipment that can track me directly through the star songs. We need to be gone before they dock. Then let's get moving. What followed was like something out of a fever dream. As they made their way through the station, watched orchestrate a symphony of mechanical chaos. Lights went out in corridors behind pursuing guards, leaving them stumbling in darkness. Elevators stopped between floors, trapping search teams. Emergency bulkheads sealed themselves at random intervals, forcing them to take longer routes to their destinations. Most impressively, the station's security sensors began reporting his presence in a dozen different locations simultaneously. Watched on his tablet as confused guards chased phantom readings through sections of the station that had never even visited. How are you doing all this? He asked as they paused at a junction in the maintenance network. The star songs connect everything, she explained, her voice taking on an otherworldly quality as she worked. Every circuit, every processor, every sensor array, they all vibrate with the same cosmic frequencies that I can hear and influence. It is like conducting an orchestra where every instrument is connected to every other instrument. They reached the cargo bay level without encountering a single guard. His tablet showed that the security teams were still chasing false signals throughout the station, completely unaware that their quarry was already at their destination. But as they prepared to enter the bay itself, received a message that made his heart sink. What is wrong? Asked, sensing his distress. Sarah's people are running into trouble. The military is blocking all approaches to the station. My sister's ship can't get through. So we are trapped. Not necessarily. Pulled up the cargo bay's ship registry on his tablet. There, a human freight hauler docked at Bay 7. Captain Independent Trader, she owes me a favor. You know this person. I fixed her ship's atmospheric processor last month when the mechanics said it would take weeks to get parts. She said if I ever needed anything, grinned. Well, I need something. They made their way to docking Bay 7, moving carefully through the cargo handling areas. Its control over the station's systems kept security cameras pointed away from them and ensured that the few dock workers they encountered were conveniently called away to deal with emergencies in other sections. Captain's ship, the Wandering Star, was a beat-up but well-maintained cargo hauler. Had spent 3 days crawling through its systems, and he knew it was much more capable than it looked. Herself was a former military pilot who'd gone into independent trading after the Galactic War. They found her in the ship's cargo hold, overseeing the loading of medical supplies bound for a colony world in the Outer Rim. She called out when she saw them, "What brings you down to the cargo level, and who's your friend?" Was a tall woman with graying hair and the kind of steady presence that associated with people who'd seen combat. Her eyes took in unusual appearance without judgment, but could tell she was immediately on alert. "I need that favor right now." His expression turned serious. "What kind of trouble are we talking about?" "The kind where an innocent person needs to disappear very quickly before very bad people do very bad things to her." Looked at more carefully, taking in the subtle signs of trauma and the way she stayed close to his side. Her expression softened slightly. "Research subject." Nodded. "They've been torturing her for 3 years, trying to unlock her species' abilities. I found her and got her out, but now the whole station is on lockdown and military ships are incoming." "Damn," ran a hand through her hair. "I've heard rumors about what goes on in some of these facilities. Always hoped they weren't true." "They're true," said quietly, "and worse than the rumors." Looked at her for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "All right, I can get you off the station, but it won't be easy. Those military ships will scan every vessel that tries to leave." "What if they don't see us leave?" asked. "What do you mean?" Looked at, "Can you interfere with their sensors? Make it look like ship is still docked while we're actually flying away." Considered this. "Possibly, but it would require me to maintain a complex deception over multiple ships simultaneously. And once we are away from the gravitational convergence point, my abilities will be much weaker." "How much time would you need to establish the deception?" 10 minutes to set up the false signals. Then perhaps 20 minutes of flight time before the deception becomes too difficult to maintain." Was following the conversation with growing amazement. "You're talking about spoofing military-grade sensor arrays. That's not possible." "A lot of things are possible when you can hear the star songs," said simply. Stared at her for a moment, then grinned. "Well, I'll be damned. I thought your people were extinct." "Nearly extinct. I am possibly the last." "Then we'd better make sure you stay alive." Turned to, "I'm in, but if we're doing this, we need to move fast. Loading is almost complete, and I was planning to depart in 30 minutes anyway." They spent the next 10 minutes preparing for what privately thought of as the most desperate escape plan he'd ever been part of. Crew, a pair of veteran spacers who'd worked with their captain for years, accepted the sudden change in plans with a kind of calm professionalism that came from experience in dangerous situations. Positioned herself near the ship's sensor array, her hands resting on the control panels as she reached out with her abilities to touch the station's communication networks. Watched her work with growing amazement as false signals began propagating through the system. "The military ships will see what they expect to see," she explained as she worked. "Their sensors will show the wandering star still docked at Bay 7, loading cargo on schedule. Meanwhile, we will actually be following a flight path that keeps us in the sensor shadow of the station's bulk." "For how long?" asked. "Long enough to reach the hyperspace jump point. Once we are in hyperspace, they cannot follow without knowing our destination." "And where exactly are we going?" And exchanged glances. They'd been so focused on escaping that they hadn't really thought about what came after. "Earth," said finally. "My sister can arrange protection there while we figure out the long-term plan." Nodded. "Earth it is. Everyone strap in. We're launching in 2 minutes." The takeoff was the smoothest had ever experienced. Despite the military blockade around the station, despite the search teams still hunting through the corridors, despite the impossibility of what they were attempting, the wandering star lifted off from the cargo bay and slipped away into space without raising a single alarm. Watched on the ship's displays as the military vessels continued their patrol patterns around the station, completely unaware that their target was already escaping. Sat beside him, her eyes closed in concentration as she maintained the complex web of false signals that hid their departure. "This is incredible," said from the pilot's seat. "Their sensors are showing us exactly where we should be, loading cargo and filing departure requests. How are you doing this?" "The star songs connect all things," murmured without opening her eyes. "Once you learn to listen, you can influence any system that uses electromagnetic or gravitational fields for communication or navigation." That's practically everything in modern space travel." "Yes." Felt a chill of understanding. They hadn't just been torturing to unlock her abilities. They'd been trying to create a weapon that could control any technological civilization in the galaxy. No wonder they'd been willing to commit such atrocities to achieve their goal. but they'd fundamentally misunderstood what they were dealing with. Abilities weren't powered by fear and pain. They were powered by harmony and connection. The more traumatized had become, the less access she'd had to the cosmic forces that gave her species their extraordinary capabilities. It was only when he'd shown her kindness and trust, when he'd helped her remember what it felt like to be safe, that her abilities had begun to return. They could have tortured her for 1,000 years and never achieved what one human technician had accomplished with simple compassion. 20 minutes after launch, they reached the hyperspace jump point, opened her eyes, looking exhausted but triumphant. "The deception is breaking down," she said. "They will discover our escape within minutes." "That's fine," replied. "We're already at the jump point, next stop Earth." The hyperspace transit would take 18 hours, long enough for word of their escape to spread throughout the galaxy, but also long enough for Sarah and her people to prepare for their arrival. Sent a coded message to his sister, explaining what had happened and what they would need. The response came back within an hour. Asylum approved, full diplomatic protection authorized, medical and psychological support standing by. For the first time since this entire adventure had begun, allowed himself to relax. They'd done it. They'd gotten away from her torturers and were bringing her to a place where she could heal and recover. But as the hours passed, and they traveled through the strange non-space of hyperspace, began to realize that rescuing was just the beginning. She was potentially the last surviving member of an ancient and powerful species. The knowledge and abilities she possessed could change the balance of power in the galaxy. And there would be people, organizations, governments, maybe entire species who would want to control her for their own purposes. "What are you thinking about?" asked. She'd been resting in the ship's small passenger cabin, but now she came to sit beside him in the observation lounge. "The future," said honestly. "What happens after we reach Earth? There are going to be people who want to use you just like they did. But you will not let them." It wasn't a question, stated it as a simple fact, with complete confidence in his character. The trust in her voice was both humbling and terrifying. "I'll do everything I can to protect you," promised, "but I'm just one person. You are the person who heard me crying in the darkness and chose to help. You are the person who risked everything to set me free." Took his hand, and again felt that whisper of connection to something vast and eternal. "I do not need an army to protect me. I need someone I can trust to help me remember who I am." Squeezed her hand gently. "I can do that. And I can help you become who you are meant to be as well." "What do you mean?" Smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, it was a smile of pure joy rather than just relief. "You have been listening to the star songs through me. Your mind harmonizes with the cosmic frequencies in ways I have never felt from another being. You may not be, but you have the potential to hear the music of the cosmos yourself." Felt his world shift slightly. "That's not possible." "Many things are possible when you have the right teacher." Eyes sparkled with mischief. "And I owe you quite a debt. Teaching you to hear the star songs would be a good beginning to repaying it." As their ship hurtled through hyperspace toward Earth, found himself contemplating a future he'd never imagined. A future where he might learn to touch the cosmic forces that connected all things, where he and might explore the galaxy together as partners rather than protector and protected. It was a future that would bring dangers he couldn't yet imagine, but it was also a future filled with wonders beyond his wildest dreams. And it all started with a simple choice to help someone who needed it. The wandering star dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 18 hours after their escape from the station. Immediately, they were hailed by a sleek diplomatic vessel bearing the insignia of the Galactic Ethics Monitoring Division. "This is Commander Sarah aboard the GEMS vessel Integrity," came the familiar voice of Sister. "Permission to come aboard." "Permission granted," replied. "Bay 2 is open and ready." As Sarah's ship docked with the wandering star, felt tense beside him. Meeting new people was still difficult for her, especially official representatives of any government organization. "She's my sister," reminded her. "She's one of the good ones." "I trust you," said simply, "so I will trust her." Sarah came aboard with a small diplomatic team, but she immediately dismissed them to speak with and privately. She was tall-like, with the same dark hair and determined expression, but where was gentle and patient, Sarah radiated the kind of confident authority that came from years of dealing with interstellar politics. "You beautiful idiot," she said, pulling her brother into a fierce hug. "Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic incident you've just caused?" "A necessary one." "Definitely a necessary one," Sarah turned to with a warm smile. "And you must be, I've read the files transmitted about what was done to you. I'm so sorry." Studied Sarah carefully before responding. "You are not like your brother." "How so?" "He thinks with his heart first, then with his head. You think with your head first, then with your heart." Paused. "But both of you have good hearts, that is what matters." Sarah's smile widened. "I think I like you already. And you're right about my brother, he's always been the one to jump in and help first, then figure out the consequences later." "Hey, it worked out," protested. "This time, but I need you to understand the situation we're dealing with. The government is claiming you're a dangerous weapons platform that was stolen from a legitimate research facility. They're demanding your immediate return." Felt's hand tightened in his, and we're telling them to go to hell, but in much more diplomatic language. Earth has granted you full asylum, and we have enough evidence of what was really happening at that facility to make the back down. Sarah's expression turned serious. "But this isn't over. There are other species in the galaxy who will want access to you, some for good reasons, some for bad ones." "What kind of good reasons?" asked. "Scientific research conducted ethically with your full consent and participation, historical preservation of culture and knowledge, possible assistance in locating other survivors of your people." Sarah sat down across from them. "What kind of life do you want to build for yourself?" It was a question no one had asked her in 3 years. Was quiet for a long moment, considering possibilities that had seemed impossible just days before. "I want to learn to be myself again," she said finally. "To remember what it feels like to be without the fear and pain, and I want to help others who have been hurt the way I was hurt." Sarah nodded. "We can make that happen. Earth has excellent facilities for trauma recovery, and we have who specialize in helping non-human refugees. But what about your abilities? There will be pressure to study them to understand how they work." Looked at, then back at Sarah. "If it is done with respect, with my consent, and with the understanding that I am a person, not a weapon. Yes, I would like to understand my abilities better myself, and perhaps learn to teach others." "Others?" Felt his heart skip a beat as squeezed his hand. "Your brother has the potential to learn to hear the star songs. Perhaps there are other humans with this gift as well." Sarah's eyebrows rose. That would change everything, the entire balance of power in the galaxy." "Which is why it must be done carefully," said. "With wisdom, not greed, with the goal of bringing species together, not dominating them." Sarah looked between and, taking in their joined hands and the obvious bond that had formed between them. "And the two of you, what are your plans?" And exchanged glances. They hadn't had time to discuss the future in detail, but already knew that he couldn't imagine a life without her in it. Not just because she needed protection, but because being with her had awakened something in him that he'd never known existed. "We stay together," said simply. "Whatever comes next, we face it as partners." Smiled, and the lights on the ship's bridge flickered in rhythm with her happiness. "Partners," she agreed. Sarah grinned. "Well, this is going to be interesting. Welcome to Earth. I have a feeling you're going to help us change the galaxy." As their ships approached the blue-green marble of Earth hanging in the darkness of space, reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few days. He'd gone from being a simple maintenance technician to being part of something that could reshape interstellar civilization. But the most important change wasn't about politics or power. It was about connection, the discovery that the universe was far more interconnected than anyone had imagined, and that sometimes the most profound changes began with the simplest acts of kindness. He looked at who was staring at Earth with wonder in her violet eyes, and felt the first whispers of the star songs that connected all things. Their adventure was just beginning. 6 months after their arrival on Earth, stood in the observation deck of the Harmony Research Institute, watching work with a group of human volunteers in the garden below. The facility, built specifically to support her recovery and research, had become something far more significant than anyone had originally planned. Moved among the volunteers with grace and patience, teaching them to sense the subtle electromagnetic fields that existed everywhere in nature. Under her guidance, 12 humans had already begun to hear faint whispers of the star songs. The implications were staggering. "She's remarkable," said Doctor, the WHO had been working with since their arrival. "The trauma she experienced should have taken years to overcome, if ever, but her progress has been extraordinary." "She's stronger than anyone gave her credit for," replied. "The thought they were breaking her, but they were really just burying her strength under layers of fear, once that fear was removed." "She bloomed," Doctor smiled. "And she's not the only one. Your own development has been unprecedented. I've never seen a human learn abilities so quickly." Flexed his fingers, feeling the subtle currents of electromagnetic energy that flowed through the research facility's walls. It had taken him 3 months of intensive training with to hear his first star song, but once the connection was made, his abilities had grown rapidly. He still couldn't match what could do, but he could influence simple electronic systems and sense the emotional states of people around him. More importantly, he could serve as an anchor for when she worked with her more powerful abilities. Their minds harmonized in ways that allowed her to achieve feats that would have been impossible alone. Doctor said, "There's something I need to discuss with you, something and I have been talking about." "Oh, we want to leave Earth together." Doctor's expression grew concerned. "I understand that you've formed a strong bond with, but she's still recovering from severe trauma. The stability of this environment has been crucial to her healing." "I know, but she's not the same person who was rescued from that facility. She's healed, she's strong, and she's ready to face the galaxy again." Turned from the window to face the doctor directly. "More than that, she wants to help other people who are in the same situation she was." "What do you mean?" "There are refugees scattered across the galaxy. Not many, but some. Most of them are hiding, terrified that they'll be captured and experimented on like was. She wants to find them, help them heal, maybe build a new community." Doctor was quiet for a moment. "And you want to go with her?" "She asked me to. She says that having someone she trusts beside her makes her stronger, helps her abilities work more effectively." Paused. "And honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else with my life. Working with her, helping people who need it, it feels like what I was always supposed to be doing." "The two of you have become quite close." It wasn't really a question, and found himself blushing slightly. His relationship with had evolved far beyond protector and protected. They were partners now in every sense of the word: intellectual, emotional, and increasingly romantic. "We have," he admitted. "Is that a problem?" "Not medically, no. Psychological evaluations show that she's formed healthy emotional attachments and has regained her ability to trust and connect with others. If anything, your relationship has been beneficial to her recovery." Doctor smiled. "But what you're talking about is dangerous. There are still people out there who would love to capture and use her abilities for their own purposes." "I know, but we can't stay hidden forever. And the galaxy needs to see that humans and other species can work together as equals, not as dominant and subordinate races." Before Doctor could respond, the door to the observation deck opened and entered, her silver hair still catching the light in that otherworldly way. She'd gained weight since arriving on Earth, and her violet eyes now sparkled with life and humor rather than fear and pain. She said, moving to stand beside him at the window, "Sarah is here. She says she has news about our request." Sarah had arrived that morning for what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic check-in, but suspected there was more to her visit. The Galactic Ethics Monitoring Division had been keeping close tabs on the research being conducted at the Harmony Institute, and the results were causing quite a stir in interstellar political circles. They found Sarah in the facility's main conference room, reviewing files on her tablet with the kind of focused intensity that meant she was dealing with something significant. "Sit down," she said without preamble. "We need to talk." They took seats across from her, and noticed that was unconsciously reaching out with her abilities, sensing Sarah's emotional state through the facility's electronic systems. It was a habit she'd developed as a survival mechanism, but it also gave her insight into people's true feelings. "You're worried," said, "but also excited. Something has happened." Sarah smiled ruefully. "I keep forgetting how perceptive you are now. Yes, something has happened. Several somethings, actually." She set down her tablet and looked at them both seriously. "First, the government has formally apologized for the illegal detention and experimentation conducted at their research facility. It's the first time they've ever admitted to wrongdoing regarding another species." Felt a surge of satisfaction. That's fantastic. It gets better. The facility has been shut down, and the researchers responsible have been arrested and charged under galactic war crime statutes. It turns out that once we started investigating, we found evidence of similar experiments on members of at least 6 other species. His expression grew sad. There were others suffering as I suffered. Yes, but they're being freed now, thanks to the evidence we gathered from your case. You saved them, all of them. We saved them, corrected Taking's hand. I could not have done any of it alone. Sarah's smile widened. Which brings me to the second piece of news. The Galactic Council has authorized the creation of a new organization, the Trauma Recovery Initiative. Its mission will be to locate and assist refugees and survivors of illegal experimentation, trafficking, and other crimes across the galaxy. Felt his heart rate increase, and they want you two to run it. The silence that followed was profound. Stared at his sister, trying to process what she'd just said. The opportunity she was describing was everything they'd hoped for and more. You want us to travel the galaxy, finding people who need help? Asked carefully. Not just finding them, helping them heal, connecting them with resources, building support networks between survivor communities. Sarah leaned forward. Your unique abilities and experiences make you perfectly suited for this work. And your skills as both a technician and someone who can interface with abilities make you an ideal partner. What about resources, ships, personnel, funding? The ITRI would be jointly funded by Earth, the Federation, and 15 other member species. You'd have access to a state-of-the-art research vessel with full diplomatic immunity and a small crew of specialists in medicine and relations. Looked at, seeing the hope and determination growing in her violet eyes. This was exactly what they'd dreamed of, a chance to help others while exploring the galaxy together. There would be dangers, said thoughtfully. People who would still want to capture me, organizations that would prefer their crimes remain hidden. Absolutely. That's why the ship would also carry a small security detail, and you'd have the full backing of the Galactic Ethics Monitoring Division. Sarah's expression grew serious. I won't lie to you, it would be dangerous work, but it would also be some of the most important work being done in the galaxy right now. Felt's hand tightened in his, and through their connection he sensed her emotional state. There was fear there, but it was overwhelmed by excitement, determination, and something else. A sense of purpose that had been missing from her life since the destruction of her. When would we start? Asked. The ship is being retrofitted now. It could be ready in 2 months, Sarah smiled. I take it you're interested. Yes, said immediately. Yes, we are very interested. 2 months later, stood on the bridge of the ISV Harmony's song, watching the blue marble of Earth shrink in thee as they headed toward their first mission. The ship was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built by human and shipyards working together. It combined the best technologies of multiple species into something that was greater than the sum of its parts. Much like the crew, reflected. In addition to himself, and they had Doctor as their chief, Captain as their pilot, she'd volunteered immediately when she learned about the mission, and a dozen specialists from various species who had dedicated their lives to helping trauma survivors. First destination is the system, announced from the pilot's station. We've received reports of possible refugees hiding in the asteroid mining colonies there. Stood beside at the observation windows, her hand resting on the ship's sensor controls. Over the past months, her abilities had grown even stronger, and she could now sense life signs from several light-years away. I can feel them, she said softly. 3 individuals, possibly 4. They are afraid but alive. How long since they've had contact with other? Years. They have been alone for so long they have forgotten what it feels like to not be afraid. Its expression grew determined. We will help them remember. The journey, too, took 5 days in hyperspace. During that time, and worked with the crew to prepare for their first contact with refugees. It was delicate work approaching people who had been traumatized and hunted required careful planning and infinite patience. But as their ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, felt a surge of confidence. They were doing something important, something that would make a real difference in the lives of people who desperately needed help. More than that, they were proving something about the power of cooperation between species. Humans working alongside other galactic civilizations, not as dominant partners, but as equals committed to shared values of compassion and justice. Approaching the mining colonies now, reported. I'm reading 3 major installations and about 40 smaller operations scattered through the asteroid belt. Closed her eyes and reached out with her abilities, her consciousness touching the electromagnetic fields that permeated the system. They are in the largest colony, hiding in the deep mining tunnels where the background radiation interferes with most sensors. Smart observed, but they must be incredibly isolated down there. They are, opened her eyes and could see tears glistening in them. They think they are the only ones left. They do not know that I survived, that there are others. Took her hand, feeling their familiar connection strengthen. Then let's go tell them some good news. The mining colony was a rough, industrial place carved out of a massive asteroid. Its inhabitants were mostly independent prospectors and their families, the kind of people who chose the hard life of asteroid mining in exchange for freedom from government oversight. It was exactly the kind of place where refugees could disappear if they were careful. And approached the colony administrator's office together, knowing that their first challenge would be convincing the humans who ran this place to trust them. Asteroid miners were notoriously suspicious of outsiders, especially government representatives. The administrator, a grizzled woman named Wu, listened to their explanation with obvious skepticism. So you're telling me I've got 3 aliens hiding in my deepest tunnels, and you want permission to go down there and talk to them? We're telling you that you've got 3 traumatized refugees who have been living in fear for years, replied. We're here to help them, not to arrest them or cause trouble for your operation. And if they don't want your help, stepped forward, then we leave them alone. We are not here to force anyone to do anything. We are here to offer choices to people who have not had choices in a very long time. Wu studied carefully, taking in her unusual appearance and the calm dignity with which she spoke. You're one of them, aren't you? The same species as whoever's hiding in my mines. Yes, I am. And I am here because I know what it is like to be alone and afraid in a galaxy that seems hostile to everything you are. Something in his voice seemed to convince Wu. All right, you can go down there, but I'm sending one of my people with you, and if there's any trouble. There won't be, promised. The journey into the deepest parts of the mining complex took several hours. They descended through layers of industrial machinery and excavated tunnels until they reached areas where the rock itself seemed to hum with electromagnetic interference. They chose well, murmured as they moved through the shadowy passages. This level of interference would make it nearly impossible for most sensors to detect them. But as they went deeper, could see that was becoming increasingly agitated. Her abilities were picking up the emotional state of the refugees they were approaching, and it wasn't good. They're terrified, she whispered. They can sense us coming and they think we are hunters. Can you communicate with them? Let them know who you are. Nodded and closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind across the electromagnetic fields that filled the tunnels. Felt the whisper of her thoughts as she sent out a message in the ancient language, a complex harmony of concepts and emotions rather than mere words. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Through their connection, felt the shock, disbelief, and desperate hope of the refugees as they realized they were not alone. They found them in a natural cave that had been expanded by mining equipment, 3 who looked even more traumatized than had been when first found her. They were thin and pale, their clothes little more than rags, their wings folded protectively around themselves. But when entered the cave, when they saw another of their kind alive and healthy and strong, the change was miraculous. They fell to their knees weeping, reaching out to touch her with shaking hands as if to confirm that she was real. Sister of stars, the eldest whispered in their musical language. We thought we were the last. We thought the star songs had died forever. The star songs live, replied her own voice thick with emotion. And so do we, all of us. What followed was a reunion that knew he would never forget. The 3 refugees, their names translated roughly as, and had been hiding in the asteroid mines for over 2 years, living on scraps and growing increasingly despondent as they lost hope of ever finding others of their kind. They told their story in bits and pieces, sometimes in broken galactic standard, sometimes in their own language with translating. They were survivors of a refugee ship that had been attacked by pirates. The rest of their group had been killed or captured, and they had barely escaped in a damaged lifeboat. We have been afraid for so long, said. Afraid to use our abilities, afraid to fly, afraid to sing the old songs. The fear became like poison in our hearts. I understand, said gently. I was poisoned by fear for years as well, but fear can be healed and abilities can be recovered. She reached out to Take's hands and watched in amazement as the lights in the cave began to pulse with the rhythm of two hearts beating in harmony. For the first time in years, his abilities responded to his emotions. How, asked in wonder, how do you still have such strength? Looked at with a smile that lit up her entire face. Because I learned that I was not alone, because someone chose to help me when I needed help most, because I discovered that the star songs become stronger when they are shared. The process of bringing the three refugees back to full health took several weeks. The Harmony's song remained docked at the mining colony while Doctor and her team worked to address years of malnutrition, medical neglect, and psychological trauma. But the most important healing happened when the four were together. Watched in fascination as they taught each other to hear the star songs again, their combined abilities creating harmonies that made the ship's instruments hum with new frequencies. It's like watching people remember how to breathe, Doctor observed during one of their sessions. Their entire physiology is designed to work in harmony with cosmic forces, but trauma had cut them off from that connection. And now, asked, now they're becoming themselves again. By the time they were ready to leave the system, the three rescued had made an important decision. They wanted to join the crew of the Harmony's song to help find and heal other survivors of their species. There are more, explained in her soft, musical voice. We can feel them sometimes like distant echoes in the star songs, scattered across the galaxy, hiding, afraid, alone. Then we find them, said simply, all of them. Over the following months, the Harmony's song became something unprecedented in galactic history, a mobile sanctuary for the traumatized and lost. They rescued two more from a slave market in the Vega system. They helped a group of refugees who had been experimented on by the same research program that had tortured. They even assisted several humans who had been captured and held by trafficking organizations. With each success, the crew grew more confident and capable. His own abilities continued to develop under his guidance, and he found himself able to interface with alien technologies in ways that amazed even the ship's specialists. But the most significant development was the growing relationship between him and what had begun as protector and protected had evolved into something deeper and more complex, a true partnership of minds and hearts that enhanced both of their abilities. You know, Captain observed one evening as they sat in the ship's observation lounge, I've never seen anything quite like what you two have. What do you mean? Asked. The way you complement each other. Abilities are incredible on their own, but with you there to anchor and amplify them, she can accomplish things that should be impossible, and your own development has been extraordinary. Leaned against shoulder, her wings folding around them both in a gesture of contentment. We make each other stronger, she said simply. It's more than that, continued. You've created something new, a way for humans and to work together that brings out the best in both species. The galactic community is taking notice. She was right. Reports of their work had spread throughout the galaxy, and the Harmony's song was receiving requests for assistance from dozens of worlds. More importantly, other species were beginning to experiment with similar cooperative relationships. They had started a program to train humans in their energy healing techniques. They were working with human engineers to develop new technologies that combined their different approaches to physics. Even some of the more xenophobic species were beginning to reconsider their isolationist policies. We're changing things, realized. Not just rescuing individuals, but actually changing the way species interact with each other. That was always the hope, said. When I first touched your mind in that maintenance tunnel, I sensed something about humans that I had never felt before. A capacity for empathy that transcends species boundaries. A willingness to help others even when there is no benefit to yourselves. Plenty of humans aren't like that, pointed out. No, but enough are, and those humans working with other species who share their values can change the galaxy, smiled. We are proof of that. As if to emphasize her point, a soft chime from the ship's communication system announced an incoming message. Pulled up the display and saw Sarah's face appear on the screen. I have news, she said without preamble. The Galactic Council has voted to establish the Cooperative Species Initiative, a formal program to encourage the kind of interspecies partnerships you've been developing. They want the Harmony's song to serve as the flagship for the new organization. And exchanged amazed glances. What does that mean exactly? Asked. It means funding, support, and official recognition for your work. It also means a fleet of ships like the Harmony's song, each one crewed by mixed-species teams trained in trauma recovery and cooperative techniques. How many ships? Asked. To start, 50. Within 5 years, the plan is for over 200 vessels working throughout the galaxy. Sarah's smile was radiant. You did it. You've started something that's going to transform interstellar civilization. Later that evening, and stood together on the ship's observation deck, watching the stars wheel past as they traveled through hyperspace toward their next mission. In the distance, could see the faint outlines of other vessels, part of the growing fleet that was being assembled to continue their work. Do you ever regret it? Asked quietly. Giving up your simple life as a maintenance technician to travel the galaxy with a traumatized alien. Laughed softly. Are you kidding? This is the best thing that ever happened to me. Besides, he turned to look at her, taking in the way the starlight caught in her silver hair and made her violet eyes glow. You're not.